Hi, this is Christopher Wing, and I am posting my third video on YouTube before I begin my journey to every Disney theme park on Earth around the world in under 80 hours. So we're getting down to crunch time here because it's Sunday and I leave on Wednesday, so just a few days left, and I thought I would talk a little bit about some of the planning that went into this trip and also what I'll be taking with me. So on the planning side of things, the first thing I had to do was figure out if the trip was even actually logistically feasible. And that meant figuring out how long it takes to fly from, say, Orlando to Paris, from Paris to Hong Kong to Tokyo, and so on. And then once I had all of those numbers, I had to figure out how long I'd need actually on the ground in each location. How long does it take to land, to get through the airport, to go through customs or passport control, to get to the train, to take the train or cab or whatever I need to take to get to the theme park, how long I want to spend in the theme park, and then the whole thing in reverse to get back. So once I figured out those rough numbers, I put everything together in a big giant Excel spreadsheet and figured out that theoretically you could do the whole thing in 60 hours. However, we don't live in a theoretical world, unfortunately, where planes arrive and depart exactly the moment that you want them to, and that there's always a train pulling up or there's always a cab ready to take you wherever you need to go. So working with the online tools for flights, primarily I used matrix.itasoftware.com and Google Flights. These are actually the same software. Google owns them both, but they have kind of a different interface and they allow you to do slightly different things as far as searching for combinations of flights and cities and stopovers and all sorts of things like that. One of the challenges on this trip was that I couldn't just go to one airline site necessarily and book a ticket for going around the world, because not every airline goes to every single destination. Most of them don't necessarily have nonstop flights. In fact, between Paris and Hong Kong, there's only one nonstop flight a day, essentially. So that kind of limited some of my search options. But once I had all that figured out, then I had to figure out what I'm going to do on the ground. So as I mentioned, in the US, I'm pretty much going to be taking cars because we're a pretty car-centric type of location. But in Europe and in Asia, to the extent possible, I'm going to try to take the local public transportation, which means either a train or a metro. So when it comes to Paris, it was interesting that I did a search for all of the train schedules in Paris to get from the airport to Disneyland. And one of the things I found was that the French train website was not really very user-friendly. So I ended up using the German train website, Deutsche Bahn. Even though that it's based out of Germany, strangely enough, they have really accurate train schedule information for everywhere in Europe. So that made it pretty easy to actually print out and see when the trains were arriving and departing that I needed. Over in Japan, they have a similar tool online. They have something called Hyperdia, I think it's called. Hyperdia, I don't know. But either way, they have really, really detailed information on all of the metro connections within Tokyo to get between the airport and the theme parks. So once I had all that information, I put it into another big giant spreadsheet. And this one's all nicely color-coded based on the destination along the way, and basically charted out where I'm going to be minute to minute on this entire trip. Now, some people look at this and say, oh my goodness, that sounds horrible, there's no spontaneity. And unfortunately on a trip like this, that's right, there is no spontaneity, because it's not a vacation. It's really kind of a challenge. It's like the Amazing Race. It's not the kind of trip that I would necessarily recommend for somebody who wants to go on a vacation to any of these destinations. But it's what I have to do in order to make sure that I'm where I need to be when I need to be there. So that pretty much does it as far as the planning side of things is concerned. But as far as what I'm going to be actually taking with me on the trip, believe it or not, it all fits in this backpack. So it's a pretty standard sized backpack here, but it is a kind of a special backpack. You'll see it says WED Imagineering on it. So Imagineering is the part of the Disney company that deals with actually designing most of the things that you see in the theme park, everything from the rides to the lighting to the signage, you name it. WED here is actually what they used to be called. Before they were Imagineering, it was WED Enterprises, and it had this really cool logo. And the name is just derived from Walt Disney's initials, so Walter Elias Disney, WED. So in there, I've got some clothes, obviously, not a lot, mostly socks and underwear and t-shirts and things like that. I have a little bag of toiletries like this, so I put it all in one little quart Ziploc bag. It's not very glamorous, but A, it helps me from taking too much stuff, and B, I found that different countries have different kind of rules as far as how they want you to present your liquids and things like that. So putting them in a quart plastic bag like this pretty much satisfies all the requirements everywhere, so it just makes getting through the x-ray machine that much faster. And then I have another bag here that's full of my kind of electronic accessories, you know, cords and wires and cables and extra batteries and things like that. So that's all in there. So I have to bring a few other things with me. Obviously, my annual pass that gets me into the parks in the United States, both in California and in Florida. And then in Florida, they have this handy item, which is called a Magic Band, which basically stores that annual pass information on an RFID chip, which you then swipe at turnstiles and things to not only to get into the park, but if I were staying on property, it would also be my room key, and you could even pay for things with it as well. So it's a pretty handy item. So almost everywhere I'm going will take credit cards as a form of payment. And most places have ATMs where you can withdraw money as well, but not everywhere. So for example, in Japan, when you go to Tokyo Disneyland, you may find that all the ATMs in the park only take Japanese issued ATM cards. If you have an American card and you want to get money out, you actually have to go to an ATM near the Starbucks in the mall outside of the theme park in order to withdraw money. So it's always a good idea to have some of the local currency on hand when you land, just in case you can't get to an ATM right away. So I thought I'd show you, I went to my local bank here and I had them order up a little bit of money in each currency that I'm going to be dealing with. So first up we have euros. This is what they use in France. This is what, 35 euros total here, which is about 40 bucks in American money. You can see they've got mostly pictures of architecture on them and so shiny metallic ribbons that run through them. Another interesting thing is that obviously they're all different colors and different sizes. So the larger the bill, the larger the actual physical bill as well. Now moving over to the Hong Kong side of things, the Hong Kong money, similarly very brightly colored here, 20, 50, 100, so it's 170 Hong Kong dollars, but that's actually only about 20 bucks in American money. One interesting thing about the Hong Kong money is that it's not all issued from one Federal Reserve Bank type of thing. You can actually see that different banks issue different bills. So, for example, these ones were issued by HSBC, which is kind of like looking at American money and seeing, you know, Bank of America or Wells Fargo on it. Another interesting thing is even bills that were issued by the same bank may have different designs. So here's the $20 bill that I showed you a minute ago, and here's another $20 bill, both issued from HSBC, but you can actually see very different designs on them as well. And then over in Japan, the money isn't quite so exciting, I've got to say. So I have here 10,000 yen and 1,000 yen. So 11,000 yen, that's worth about 100 bucks US. And you can see they've got some kind of watermark portraits in the center that are hard to see on a video. But fairly kind of boring by comparison, not a lot of colors. The paper is this kind of sepia tone paper, which is kind of weird, but there you go. Another interesting thing is that there are locations where you have some options aside from just credit cards and cash. So this, for example, is an octopus card, which started out as the Metro card for Hong Kong, right? It's got this little Moebius strip infinity symbol on it there. The interesting thing about this is, yeah, you can use it on the Metro to buy a train ticket, but you can also use it all over town. So you can go to McDonald's and buy an Egg McMuffin, you can go to Starbucks and buy a latte, you can go to 7-Eleven and buy some gum, whatever you need that's a fairly small dollar amount, you can actually use this to tap and go and pay at all the stores, as well as use it to actually ride the public transportation. So it's about the closest thing I've seen anywhere to, you know, electronic cash that they kept promising us for all those years and we still never have gotten, but they've got it in Hong Kong, so good for them. Over in Tokyo, this is the Metro card for Tokyo. It's called the Suica card, and you can see it's got a little penguin on the bottom of it, which is very cute. One interesting thing about the Metro in Tokyo is that different trains in different directions are actually operated by different companies. So there are actually a whole bunch of different passes that you can buy But the good news is most of them are compatible with each other, so you don't need to have 15 different passes to ride 15 different trains. So I chose this one because I like the Penguin. And then finally, I do have my iPad, which I'm bringing with me. I don't really need it because the in-seat entertainment in these flights can be very, very extensive, much more so than on a typical American domestic flight, where they can have hundreds and hundreds of movies and channels and TV shows and things. So I'm probably okay, but in case, you never know, one might break or something, you always get the one seat that doesn't have the in-seat video working. And then, of course, the most important thing is my passport. So I just got a brand new one, and you can see it's extra thick because I tend to do a lot of traveling. And in the old days, you used to actually fill up your passport pages, and then you could mail away to get extra pages inserted into the passport. But they stopped doing that. So now you just have to get, if you think you're going to be traveling a lot, you can get a passport that's double the thickness of a normal one. So I did that. So you add all that stuff up and put it in a bag, and it ends up being just about 11 pounds, which doesn't sound like a lot, but I think after a few days it's going to be a lot heavier than I think it sounds right now. And that's not even including all the stuff that I'm probably going to buy along the way on the trip. So we'll see how much it ends up weighing when I get home. But for now, that's it, and only a couple more days to go. See you then.